A real breakthrough in the fight against Russian ballistic missiles. Last night in Paris, something happened that in a few years will be called the starting point of a new European defense. Ukraine and 9 European countries signed a declaration on the creation of an integrated ballistic missile defense coalition. And think about it, the initiator, main developer, and integrator of the pan-European air defense shield was not Germany, not France, not Spain, and not even the United States of America, but the Ukrainian company Firepoint. In simple terms, 10 European countries agreed to jointly develop their own European missile defense system, which in the future will protect not only Ukraine, but all of Europe as a whole. But the key to everything, of course, is the numbers. On the evening of July 13, the company Firepoint presented the Ukrainian interceptor FP7X, which costs about $700,000. The American PAC-3 missile for the Patriot system costs almost $4 million. It's more than 5 times cheaper. And that's exactly what changes everything. Now, ballistic missiles can finally be shot down not one by one, but on a large scale. In this episode, what kind of coalition was created in Paris, and, importantly, who joined it? What is known about the Ukrainian missile defense system Freya, and when will it finally take flight? Why does Zelensky call this a way to bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table? And also, what else did Ukraine receive in Paris? From Rafale fighter jets to licenses for the production of French missiles. My name is Alexei Pechi, let's discuss this topic together. But before we begin, most importantly, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Just click it. It will only take a second. We're moving toward the 300,000 subscribers mark. I will be personally grateful for your subscription. Thank you. So, on the evening of July 13, the leaders of Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and of course Ukraine signed a joint declaration on the creation of an integrated coalition for missile defense across all of Europe. This was reported by the Élysée Palace following the summit of the Coalition of the Willing, which was urgently convened by French President Emmanuel Macron. The goal is clear: to create an integrated missile defense architecture that will complement existing national and European systems and ultimately cover all of Europe with a missile defense shield. To achieve this, countries are combining their defense industries, science, and key combat experience. And now I will quote from the official declaration signed by those very 10 countries. We recognize Ukraine's unique experience gained during its defense against Russia's aggressive war. This is an acknowledgement that Ukraine is the only country in the world that right now every night repels massive ballistic strikes, and no one else has such experience. It is important to note that the coalition remains open to other countries. The head of Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha, has already called on partners in the EU Council to actively join it. And to put it as simply as possible, Ukraine is developing missiles, the Europeans provide technology and money, and together we are creating a powerful missile defense system. And this is where the Ukrainian missile defense system Freya comes into play. By the way, Freya is a powerful Scandinavian goddess of war and magic, as well as the patroness of love, beauty, and fertility. And right before the Coalition of the Willing Summit in Paris, the company Firepoint presented the FP7X interceptor missile, the very one that's being called a replacement for the Patriot. The missile specifications are as follows: speed up to 2,000 meters per second, range up to 200 kilometers, missile length is 7 meters and 25 centimeters, and the warhead weighs up to 150 kilograms. The body is made entirely of composite materials, and the seeker head is semi-active and infrared, developed jointly with the German company DL Defense. Freya is a multifunctional system. It is capable of operating both as an anti-aircraft and as a missile defense system. But the key task is specifically intercepting ballistic missiles, and the concept behind it makes the project truly unique. Freya is conceived as a pan-European shield jointly owned by partner countries. That is, this isn't a case of Ukraine buying something from Europe. It's not a case of Europe giving something to Ukraine or vice versa, Europe asking Ukraine for something. No. It's a joint investment. And this actually highlights the European approach itself. To put it in perspective, it's like Airbus. There is a huge company, Airbus, which is jointly owned by France, Germany, Spain, and another dozen funds and investors. And all of them more or less own this company in equal shares. But the main advantage of the Freya system is, of course, the price. Because one FP-7X interceptor missile costs about $700,000. And one PAC-3 missile for the Patriot costs about $3.8 million. Well, let's round it up to $4 million. As you can see, the difference is more than 5 times. Why is this critical? Well, because the whole problem with Ukrainian air defense is not the lack of Patriot systems themselves, but specifically the lack of missiles for them. They have the launchers and equipment, but not the missiles. Let me remind you of a scary number. Just the other night, Ukrainian air defense wasn't able to intercept a single one of the 23 Russian ballistic missiles, simply because there was nothing to shoot them down with. And as a result, at least 22 civilians died in a peaceful city. Russia produces its Iskanders relatively cheaply. I mean, of course, for an ordinary person that's still a lot of money, but in terms of missile costs, it's actually quite cheap. The West responds. It responds to this cheap Iskander design with an interceptor missile costing $4 million. This arithmetic is a losing game by definition, because the enemy bankrupts you with every launch of their Iskanders. But Freya has to break this logic. At Firepoint, they say outright that the low price should allow for scaling up production and creating large stockpiles for daily use during intense attacks. In other words, not just saving 3 missiles. Just in case, let them be saved for later, in case there's a stronger attack. No, the idea is to shoot down every ballistic missile flying at Ukraine every night. Of course, all of this sounds great, but the main question is this. When will this Freya actually launch? And here comes the most encouraging part. Experts explain that when it comes to technical solutions, everything is pretty straightforward. Europe has everything needed to assemble a missile system. And the Europeans are only missing the rocket. They don't have their own ballistic missile interceptor. And in this situation, Ukraine provides the missile, because Ukraine now has this interceptor. The radars for the new missile defense system are already known. They already exist, and prototypes of these radars are already being tested in Ukraine. All that's left is to develop the software that will integrate all these components and to resolve the issue of the launchers. And according to experts, this is a matter of just a few months. At least Firepoint says that tests of the entire system, meaning the fully assembled one, could begin before the end of this year. Analysts emphasize that the Freya project currently faces more political issues than technical ones because the technical problems would have been solved quickly. And it was exactly these political issues that were being addressed in Paris on the evening of July 13. Zelensky himself stated that not just the tests, but the first use of the Freya system could happen before the end of 2026. Zelensky explained the strategy as directly as possible. Here's his quote. The more means Ukraine has to shoot down Russian ballistic missiles, the higher the likelihood that Vladimir Putin will sit down at the negotiating table because his last argument in this war will no longer work. That's the point. Russia is bogged down at the front. Objectively, in the past month, probably not for the first time, but definitely one of the few times, they have captured less than they have lost. So obviously there are territorial losses, meaning they are not advancing. Russia's economy is on fire. Oil refining, let me remind you, has collapsed to the level of 2005. Just think about it. During almost all of Putin's time in power, oil refining is now at its lowest level. The only thing Putin still has working in this war is ballistic missiles, which he launches at peaceful cities. Terrorizing the civilian population as a means of pressure, and winter is ahead, and he understands this. And that's why, if you take away Vladimir Putin's ballistic missiles, he has absolutely nothing left. But that's not all. The anti-ballistic coalition is not the only result of the meeting of the coalition of the willing. Emmanuel Macron announced that Ukraine will receive 16 Rafale fighter jets. They will enter service in 2028 or 2029. No one ever promised them to us, so there's no need to start lamenting now. Let me remind you that in November of last year there was an agreement with the French that by 2035 Ukraine should receive a total of 100 Rafale F-4 aircraft from France. In addition, and this is truly a breakthrough, France is transferring licenses to Ukraine for the production of French high-precision weapons. In particular, these include Aster-30 anti-aircraft missiles for the SAMP-T air defense system, Scalp cruise missiles, and AASM Hammer guided aerial bombs. Scalp is the same as Storm Shadow, just in Britain. Under the British license, they are called Storm Shadow. Under the French license, they are called Scalp. And now Ukraine will be able to produce these missiles entirely on its own. That is, the French are giving us the license and saying, go ahead, work on it, build, create. And in this regard, Europe, well, I don't know if it's unfortunately or fortunately, but Europe has remained the same old Europe, which still, is always looking over its shoulder like this. What's going on in Washington? Do you remember when we used to laugh at Scholz? Scholz, remember there was that German chancellor who didn't want to send tanks to Ukraine and said, well, let America send their Abrams tanks first, and then we'll send the Leopards. Let America send some missiles first, then we'll send ours. That's how they've always acted. Nothing has changed. Next I'll quote Emmanuel Macron, and you'll understand why I'm reacting this way. US President Donald Trump has already announced the decision to allow the production of Patriot interceptor missiles in Ukraine. For our part, we have decided to license the production of Aster missiles. Several other countries have also made similar decisions. In other words, a chain reaction has started again. The US has licensed the Patriot, France is licensing the Aster, Scalp, and Hammer. And soon we'll hear other similar news. Or maybe we won't, by the way. We should consider the possibility that some countries will quietly grant licenses. And we'll find out after the fact. That is, when certain missiles are already flying towards Russia, most likely they'll announce afterward that these missiles were already produced in Ukraine. Because, say, on July 13, 2026, this country granted a license to Ukraine. Not everyone is ready to do this publicly. Ukraine is turning from a recipient of weapons into a weapons producer. I would like to note separately that the coalition of willing countries has now expanded to 37 countries. For the first time, Moldova and North Macedonia have joined. Support of 70 billion euros annually was also discussed and confirmed. This is what was discussed at the NATO summit. In 2026 it will be 70 billion, and in 2027 at least the same amount should be provided. This is great news because it creates predictability. You understand what you can count on at the very least. Remember those earlier meetings, Ramstein? At those Ramstein meetings, Mark Milley used to come out and say, so, what does everyone have? Here comes Ukraine with a list of needs. Ukraine writes a list, I need this and that. And Mark Milley asked, who has it? Who can give something? There was zero predictability. I mean, we didn't know. Is it there? Is it not? Will they give it? Will they not? Now, predictability has appeared. They tell us clearly the minimum you will get is 70 billion euros a year. That's just from NATO structures. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, separately announced that London is joining the European Military Aid Credit Programme for Ukraine, amounting to another 90 billion euros. And most notably, after the ceasefire, 25 countries are ready to send their forces to Ukraine. The Allies, as Starmer stated, will begin military exercises right away in countries neighboring Ukraine to prepare these multinational forces. And the next meeting of the Coalition of the Willing will be in September. First at the ministerial level, and then, according to Zelensky, a meeting of the leaders will take place in Kyiv, to be continued. But let's not get carried away. What could go wrong? Let's be honest. Testing the Freya system by the end of the year does not mean mass production by the end of the year. Months, or maybe even years, could pass between a prototype and a full-fledged shield over Europe. The top priority is launching this in Ukraine quickly. Europe can wait. But of course, I would really like to be wrong. And it would be great if all of this started working literally in a month. Besides, now there are 10 countries, and here's the problem. They have to agree on funding, standards, legislation, joint ownership, and so on and so on. And Europe, with its bureaucracy, can spend years discussing issues like this. Sorry. Nevertheless, something very important happened, something that will change all of Europe, I'm sure of it. For the first time, a country that is at war, that is not a member of the European Union, has become not a supplicant, but, note this, an architect of European defense. It's not Europe that's saving Ukraine right now. Ukraine is giving Europe a missile that Europe doesn't have. Just think about it. Could you have imagined something like this in 2022? I couldn't. And the main paradox of this war is being resolved. How do you stop spending $4 million to shoot down a missile that costs the enemy next to nothing? The answer is the Ukrainian Freya system. If Freya is launched and tests are promised by the end of the year, then Vladimir Putin will really lose his last effective argument, that is, ballistic missiles launched at peaceful cities. Deny him the skies and negotiations will become his only option. And that's exactly what was agreed upon in Paris on Monday evening. I'll leave it at that. Your opinion, your conclusions. Write in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would, of course, be grateful to you for that. You can do this by making any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.